You have heard the phrase, the dark web, and I would bet that the picture in your head is roughly this: some hidden basement layer of the internet, sealed off, that you would need serious technical skill to break into. I want to take that picture away from you because it is wrong in a way that actually matters. The technology underneath the dark web was not built by criminals. It was built by the United States Navy, specifically by researchers at a government laboratory, and they built it to protect their own people's communications. And when they had it working, they faced a problem that I find genuinely beautiful because the solution is so completely counterintuitive. If the only people using your secret communication system are your own agents, then the system is useless. Because the moment anyone notices you using it, they have learned the one thing you were trying to hide. Not what you said, who you are. A crowd of one is not a crowd, it is a spotlight. So the researchers did the only thing that could possibly work. They gave it away. They released it to the public, to everybody. Journalists, activists, ordinary people, and yes, inevitably, to people who would use it to break the law. Because the more different kinds of people who use a system to hide in, the better it hides every single one of them. The dark web is not a place someone built for crime. It is the crowd that a military anonymity system needed in order to function. And crime moved into that crowd the way crime moves into every crowd that has ever existed. So over the next half hour, where this technology really came from, how it actually works, in plain language, no instructions, nothing you could follow, and then the story of the marketplace that made the whole thing famous. Because the way that marketplace was brought down is not the story you have been told either. Nobody broke the encryption. Nobody needed to. The most sophisticated anonymity system in the world was undone by something much older and much more reliable. A person being a person. To understand why any of this was invented, you need to understand what the internet gives away by default. And it is not what most people think. Most people worry about content. What is in the message? And honestly, that problem was solved a long time ago. When you see the padlock in your browser, the contents of what you send are scrambled well enough that intercepting them is not a practical route in. But encryption of content protects the letter. It does nothing about the envelope. Every time your device talks to anything on the internet, that conversation has to be routed. And routing requires an address. Your connection carries where it came from and where it is going. And that information cannot be encrypted because the machines in the middle need to read it in order to do their job. It is the addressing on the outside of the parcel. Hide it, and the parcel cannot be delivered. So here is what leaks, permanently and unavoidably, no matter how strong your encryption is. Not what you said, who you talked to, when, for how long, how often, and from where. That is metadata, and I want to convince you it is not the lesser thing. Suppose I cannot read a single one of your messages, but I can see that you contacted a specific medical clinic, then a lawyer, then a family member, and that this took place over one afternoon. I do not need the contents. I have the story. The pattern of who you talk to is frequently more revealing than the words. Now put yourself in the position of a government agency in the mid-1990s, with people working abroad who need to send information home. The content is fine, encryption handles that. But the connection itself is a signal flare. Anyone watching the network sees a stream of traffic from a particular building in a particular city going to a particular government address. They do not need to decrypt anything to know that something is happening and where and who is doing it. This is the actual problem, not secrecy of content, concealment of the relationship, and you cannot solve it by encrypting harder. You have to solve it by changing the shape of the path. In the mid-1990s, at the United States Naval Research Laboratory, a small group of researchers, a mathematician and 2 computer scientists, started working on exactly this problem. Their names were Paul Syverson, Michael Reed, and David Goldschlag. And the idea they arrived at is elegant enough that I can explain it completely, in a way that will stay with you, without giving anyone a single usable instruction. Because the idea is not the dangerous part. The idea is in academic papers and has been for decades. Picture a letter, but instead of one envelope, you put it inside several, one nested inside the next, and on each envelope you write a different address. You hand the bundle to the first courier. He can open only the outermost envelope, because only that one is addressed to him. Inside, he finds another sealed envelope with instructions. Pass this to the next courier. That is all he learns. He knows who gave it to him and who to hand it to. He does not know what is inside, and he does not know where it started or where it will end. The second courier does the same. Opens his layer, finds another sealed envelope, passes it on. Same for the third. Only the final courier gets the actual message out. And by that point, he has no idea who the original sender was. He only ever saw the courier immediately before him. Layers, peeled one at a time, like an onion, which is exactly what they called it, onion routing. Now look at what that arrangement achieves, because it is very precise. The first courier knows who you are, but not what you sent or where it was going. The last courier knows the destination, but not who you are. And nobody in the middle knows either end. The knowledge is deliberately shattered. No single point in the chain holds enough to identify both sides. To reassemble it, you would have to be watching every courier at once and comparing their timings, which is not impossible, and researchers have written about that vulnerability for years, honestly and publicly. But it is enormously harder than simply reading an address off a packet. And I want to underline something about how this was done, because it runs against every instinct people have about secret government technology. They published it. The laboratory did the research through the 1990s, and they wrote it up in academic papers, presented at conferences, in the open literature, where any cryptographer in the world could read the design and attack it. They also filed the patent on the method, which is about as far from hidden as an idea can get, a patent as an idea can get. A patent is a public document that describes exactly how the thing works. That was not carelessness. It is the standard by which serious cryptography is judged. A system whose security depends on nobody knowing how it works is not secure, it is merely untested. The only way to have confidence in a design is to publish it and let people who want it to fail spend years trying to break it. So the design was public from early on, which means that for the entire history of this technology, the mechanism has never been the secret. There is nothing to leak. You can go and read how onion routing works this afternoon, in papers written by the people who invented it, and the reading will not help you find anything or do anything, because knowing how a lock is engineered is not the same as having a key. And then it sat there, a working idea, in the hands of a government, with a fundamental flaw in its deployment. The flaw was not technical. It was arithmetic, of the social kind. Here is the problem, and it is the single most important idea in this whole episode. Anonymity is not a property of a system. It is a property of a crowd. If a government builds a private anonymity network and only its own people use it, then observing someone connect to that network tells you everything. You cannot read their traffic, but you do not need to. Membership is the secret. The network has not hidden them. It has labeled them. You had built a perfect disguise that only your own agents wear. So the researchers understood something that a lot of security people at the time did not. The only way to make the system work was to give up exclusive control of it. It had to be public. It had to be open source, so that anyone could inspect it and trust it. And it had to be used by as many different kinds of people, for as many different reasons as possible. Every additional user is camouflage for everyone else. A journalist protecting a source makes it safer for a person living under a censoring government. That person makes it safer for the researcher. And all of them, together, make it safer for the government employee the thing was originally designed for. Which leads to the trade that sits at the heart of this technology. And I want to state it honestly rather than pretend it away. A system that can hide a dissident cannot tell that it is hiding a dissident. It has no way to check who deserves protection. The whole design principle is that it does not know who anyone is. That is not a bug that a clever engineer could patch. Remove it, and the system stops working for everyone. So, you build something that protects the journalist, the abuse survivor, the person under a repressive government, and by the same mechanism, in the same instant, you protect people doing genuinely harmful things. There is no version where you get the first group without the second. Anyone selling you a version where you can have one without the other does not understand what they are selling. In 2002, work began on a practical implementation, led by Roger Dingledine and Nick Mathewson, with Paul Syverson from the original laboratory team. They called it Tor, from the Onion Router. In 2004, the Naval Research Laboratory released the code under a free license. Anyone could read it, run it, and check it for themselves. By 2006, it was maintained by an independent nonprofit organization. And that is the moment the thing we are talking about actually comes into existence. Not as a hidden underworld, as a piece of published research handed over to the public with a fully documented explanation of why it had to be handed over. Everything so far has been about protecting the person visiting, but the layered envelope system had one more capability in it, and this is the specific piece that creates what people mean by the dark web. Normally, when you visit a website, the website has an address. It sits on a machine, in a building, in a country. You may be hidden from it, but it is not hidden from you. Anyone can look up where it lives. That is how the ordinary internet works, and it is why a site doing something illegal can be found and switched off. You go to the building. But if you can route a connection through layers so that the visitor's origin is unknown, you can also do it in the other direction. The result is a service where the connection between visitor and server is assembled through intermediate points, and neither end ever learns the other's location. The visitor does not know what country the machine is in, and the machine does not know who is visiting. There is no building to go to, not because it is hidden behind a stronger door, but because the address genuinely is not part of the conversation at any point. That is the actual technical meaning of the term. Not a secret area of the web, not a deeper level, just services whose location is structurally unknowable through the connection itself. And I want to correct one more thing while we are here, because these two ideas get mixed up constantly. People often talk about the deep web and the dark web as if they are the same. They are not, and the difference is almost funny once you see it. The deep web is simply everything a search engine has not indexed. Your email inbox, your bank account page, a company's internal systems, anything behind a login. That is the overwhelming majority of the internet by volume, and you use it every day. It is not mysterious. It is just not on a public list. The dark web is the much smaller category we have been describing, services reachable only through an anonymity network with no discoverable location. So when you see a dramatic graphic showing the web as an iceberg with a sinister layer at the bottom, most of that iceberg is your email. And since we are clearing things up, let me deal with the rest of the folklore, because a remarkable amount of what circulates about the subject is simply invented, and the invented parts crowd out the genuinely interesting ones. Start with the levels. You have probably seen the diagram. The web is a pyramid with numbered tiers, each one deeper and more forbidden than the last, ending in some final layer with a mysterious name that supposedly requires quantum computing to reach. There are no levels. There has never been a level system. That diagram was made up on internet forums and spread because it looks good, not because anyone found anything. There is the ordinary web, there is everything behind a login, and there are services reachable only through an anonymity network. 3 categories, and the third one is not organized into floors. Second, the size. People talk about the dark web as though it were a vast parallel internet, larger than the one we use. It is the opposite. It is small. Measurements of how many of these location unknown services exist at any time run to the tens of thousands, and a substantial fraction of those are duplicates, dead, or scams pointing at other scams. Set that against well over 1 billion sites on the ordinary web. The Tor project publishes statistics on this publicly, which is itself worth noticing. The anonymity network puts out measurements of its own usage. It is not a hidden continent. It is a small town with a lot of rumors about it. Third, and I want to be direct about this one because it frightens people, the Red Room. The claim that there are streamed, paid, real-time atrocities available if you know where to look. No verified case has ever been substantiated, not by law enforcement, not by researchers, not by journalists who have gone looking specifically to find one. And there is a technical reason that fits the absence of evidence, which is that routing a connection through several intermediate hops makes it slow. The layered system is excellent at concealing who is talking to whom. It is bad at live high bandwidth video because every layer adds delay. The thing the myth describes is close to the worst possible use of the technology. What actually thrives in that environment is exactly what you would expect from the constraints, text, small files, and slow, careful, low bandwidth transactions, which is much less cinematic and much more accurate. Fourth, the idea that you can be hacked merely by loading a page there. Visiting a website, is visiting a website. The risks are the ordinary ones: being deceived, downloading something you should not, handing over information to someone lying to you. What is genuinely different is that the environment is full of fraud because there is no recourse of any kind. The realistic danger is not a magical infection. It is that the place is thick with people whose entire business model is taking money from strangers who cannot complain to anyone. Why does any of this matter? Because the mythology does real damage in two directions at once. It makes the technology sound like a weapon, which makes life harder for the journalists and human rights workers who depend on it. And it makes the actual risks sound exotic, when the real ones are mundane, which is exactly how people get caught out. The truth is smaller and stranger than the legend. It usually is. In 2011, a marketplace opened as one of these location unknown services. It was called Silk Road, and it ran until October 2013 when it was seized and shut down by the FBI. Now, I am not going to spend this episode on what was sold. You can guess. And the guess is not interesting. What is genuinely interesting, what I think is actually worth your time, is the question of why it grew, because the technology alone does not explain it. Anonymity had existed for years by then. Illegal trade has existed forever. Something else made this particular thing scale. And the answer is that its designer did not build a criminal innovation. He copied a shopping website. Think about what any online marketplace has to solve. Not the transaction, the trust. You are sending money to a stranger you cannot identify, for goods you cannot inspect, with no possibility of legal recourse. Every rational instinct says you will be robbed. So how does any marketplace fix that? 3 mechanisms, and you have used all 3 this month. Seller ratings. A visible, accumulated public score, so a seller who has behaved well over hundreds of transactions has something valuable to lose by cheating you. Reputation becomes an asset that only exists if it is protected. Reviews. Written accounts from previous buyers, so information about a seller's behavior becomes public rather than being learned one victim at a time. And escrow. The buyer's money is held by the platform, not passed straight to the seller and only released once the buyer confirms the goods arrived. This is the important one. It removes the single most obvious way to cheat, because taking the money and running is no longer possible. The money was never in the seller's hands. Ratings, reviews, escrow. That is eBay. That is essentially every online marketplace you have ever used. Those mechanisms were invented to let strangers trade safely, and they work. They work so well that they function even in a setting with no law at all. And that, to me, is the genuinely unsettling insight of this whole story. Not that anonymity technology existed. The unsettling part is that the machinery of ordinary commercial trust is completely indifferent to what is being sold. Reputation systems do not have ethics. They have arithmetic. Point them at anything, and they will make it run more smoothly. The platform took a commission on transactions, the way platforms do. It had rules and enforcement of those rules and disputes and customer service. It looked structurally like a business, because it was one. And there is a further consequence of those mechanisms that I think is the most counterintuitive part of the whole story. Consider what a reputation system does to someone's incentives over time. A seller who has built up a long record of good transactions is sitting on something that took months to accumulate and that cannot be transferred, sold, or rebuilt quickly somewhere else. It exists only in that one place, attached to that one identity. Which means that cheating you cost them everything they have built for the value of a single transaction. So the rational move for a seller with a long record is to be scrupulously reliable. Not out of principle, out of arithmetic. The reputation is worth more than the theft. The result is a documented pattern that researchers studying these markets found repeatedly, and it is genuinely strange to say out loud. Participants in an illegal marketplace with no legal recourse whatsoever frequently reported more consistent experiences than they expected. Not because anyone involved was trustworthy, but because the structure made unreliability expensive. That is the finding I would ask you to hold on to, because it generalizes far beyond this story. Trust in a marketplace is not a moral quality of the participants. It is a property of the incentives. Build a system where reputation is valuable and hard to rebuild, and you will get reliable behavior out of people who have no particular reason to be reliable. Remove that system, and the same people behave completely differently. We tend to think good behavior online comes from good people. Mostly it comes from the fact that misbehavior is recorded and that the record follows you. This is worth remembering. The next time you decide whether to trust a stranger on any platform at all, what you are actually trusting is not them. It is the cost to them of letting you down. And there is a mirror image of that, which is that the same design creates a very specific kind of fragility. Everything depended on the platform holding the money in escrow and on the reputation records surviving. Both of those live in one place, controlled by one operator. A marketplace built entirely on anonymity still had, at its center, a single point that everyone had to trust absolutely. It also collapsed like one, but not for the reason anyone expected. So how do you bring down a service whose location cannot be determined, protected by layered encryption designed by naval researchers and inspected in public by cryptographers for a decade? Here's the answer, and I want you to sit with how ordinary it is. You do not attack the encryption. You wait for a human being to make a mistake, and then you read what they wrote in public years earlier. Because a site does not appear from nowhere. Before it has users, somebody has to tell people it exists. And in the earliest days, before there was any reason for caution, that somebody was doing marketing. Posting on ordinary public forums on the ordinary internet under an ordinary username saying, "There is this new thing, you should look at it." Those posts sat there, public, indexed, dated for years. And in one of those early posts from that same username, there was a request to get in touch with a personal email address, an address that contained a real name. That is it. That is the threat. No cryptography was broken. Nobody found a flaw in onion routing. Somebody went back through the public internet, found the earliest mentions of the site, noticed the same username appearing before and after, and pulled on it. It is old-fashioned investigative work of exactly the kind that has always worked, applied to material that was never protected in the first place because it was posted before there was anything to protect. The anonymity system did its job perfectly. It was never the way in. It protected the connection, and it has no power whatsoever over what a person voluntarily published under a name they also used elsewhere. And then there is the arrest itself, which is the detail that I think teaches the most. On the 1st of October 2013, in a public library in San Francisco, in the Branch Library reading area, investigators arrested a man sitting at his laptop. They did not seize the laptop closed. The entire operation was designed around one requirement: get the machine while it is open, unlocked, and logged in. Because full disk encryption is genuinely effective. A closed, powered down encrypted laptop is, practically speaking, a brick. The contents may be unrecoverable indefinitely. But an unlocked, running machine has already decrypted everything for its user. The keys are in memory. The sessions are live. So there was a distraction, a staged disturbance in the library, and while his attention was on it, the laptop was taken, open, running, logged in. Everything after that came from the machine. This is the lesson, and it is the reason this episode exists. The security of a system is not the security of its mathematics. It is the security of the mathematics, plus every human decision surrounding it, plus every trace left behind before anyone thought to be careful. And the weakest of those is the real number. The encryption was excellent. The encryption was never in question. What failed was a forum post from years earlier, a username used twice, and a laptop that was open at the wrong moment. Perfect anonymity technology, defeated by the entirely ordinary problem of being a person who has a past and who sometimes sits in a library. Now I am going to be careful and precise, because the man at that laptop is alive today, and this program deals in public record. So, only what the record says, with dates. Ross Ulbricht was convicted in February 2015 in federal court in the Southern District of New York on the charges brought against him in that case. In May of that year, he was sentenced to life imprisonment, a double life sentence plus 40 years without the possibility of parole. On the 21st of January 2025, he received a full presidential pardon after serving more than 11 years. Those are the three facts: a conviction, a sentence, and a pardon, each of them a matter of public record with a date attached. I'm not going to tell you what to think about any of them, whether that sentence was proportionate and whether that pardon was right. are questions people hold strong and opposing views on, and this program is not the place where you get my opinion instead of the record. You have the dates. What you conclude is yours. What I will say is what the case demonstrated technically, because that is what we are here for. A marketplace built on an anonymity system that was not broken, ended by public posts made before caution, and by a laptop taken while it was open. So what is on there today? Because the picture in most people's heads is still that library, still that marketplace, frozen in 2013. The reality is duller and considerably more useful. Major international news organizations run anonymous tip services on these networks, secure drop boxes, so that a source inside a company or a government can hand over documents without their identity being attached to the delivery. If you have read a significant leak-based investigation in the last decade, there is a reasonable chance the material arrived that way. Human rights organizations use it to receive testimony from places where sending it any other way puts the sender in danger. People living under governments that block large parts of the internet use it to reach ordinary things. Encyclopedias, news sites, messaging apps, not to hide anything, simply to read what everyone else can read. Major platforms have run versions of their own services on the network so that users in censored countries can reach them. Same technology, same layered envelopes, same principle that nobody in the chain knows both ends. What changed is nothing at all, because it never could tell the difference. That was always the design. And that brings us back to the trade we named earlier, which I do not think has a clean resolution, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. Any system that can protect a source can protect someone you would want caught, not as a side effect that better engineering might fix. As the same property, viewed from two directions, the system's entire usefulness is that it does not know who you are, and a system that does not know who you are cannot check whether you deserve it. You can decide the trade is worth it or that it is not. What you cannot do is have the protection without the cost, and anyone who tells you otherwise is describing something that has never existed. So, the three things I want to leave you with. The dark web was not built by criminals, it came out of a naval research laboratory, and it had to be given to the public. Because a hiding place with one occupant is not a hiding place, it is a label. The marketplace that made it famous did not grow because of clever cryptography. It grew because it borrowed the ordinary machinery of online trust, ratings, reviews, escrow, and that machinery has no opinion about what it is used for. And it did not fall because anyone broke the encryption. It fell because of forum posts written before anyone was being careful and a laptop that was open at the wrong moment. The mathematics held. The person did not. Which is the thing worth carrying out of here, and it applies to you and to me, and not just to famous cases. Your security is never the strength of your strongest protection. It is the strength of the most ordinary things surrounding it. The old account you forgot about, the name you reused, the moment you were not paying attention. Next week on Dark History of the Internet, we go back further to 1989, before the web existed at all. 20,000 floppy disks were mailed out to researchers and health organizations in more than 90 countries. The disks claimed to contain information about a disease. What they actually contained was a program that counted how many times the computer was switched on and then, at a specific count, scrambled the contents of the disk and displayed a message demanding payment to a post office box in Panama. It was the first ransomware attack in history. It was mailed by post on physical disks by a man with a doctorate. And the story of how it was defeated involves something that almost never happens today. The encryption was so badly implemented that a researcher simply undid it and gave the fix away for free. That is, next week. Follow the channel so it finds you.